She looked at the orchestra and nodded. They had shared this journey together, each musician contributing to the magic of the night. The unity of sound and emotion had created something extraordinary. Something beyond notes and practice, beyond talent alone. It was human connection, pure and simple, felt through music. As she stood to bow, she felt the weight of the moment settle in. She was exhausted, yes, but also exhilarated. Her body had moved, her fingers had flown, her heart had poured itself into every note. And in return, she had felt the hearts of hundreds of people in the audience. That was the gift of live performance, the exchange, the dialogue. The unspoken understanding that music creates between human beings. People continued to clap.
Oh.
Some whistling, some stamping their feet. Tears glistened in eyes across the hall. Khatia bowed again, acknowledging them, acknowledging the shared experience. It was more than applause, it was gratitude. It was love. It was recognition of something deeply human. After the performance, she walked backstage slowly, letting the applause wash over her one last time. She could still feel the music in her veins, the energy of the audience still lingering. She thought about the years of effort, the sacrifices, the practice, the doubts, and she felt a quiet pride. Not for fame or recognition, but for the fact that she had given herself completely. The audience had received it fully. She took a deep breath and allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Music had always been her voice, her escape, her truth. Tonight, it had been all that and more. It had been a bridge between herself and hundreds of people, a shared moment of beauty, emotion, and life. That connection, she knew, was rare and precious, and she cherished it deeply. Khatia left the stage finally, her body tired but her spirit soaring. She knew that people would talk about this performance, that it would linger in memory, that it might even inspire some to seek music themselves. But for her, it was not about recognition. It was about truth, about connection, about creating something real in a world that often felt rushed and disconnected. As she sat quietly backstage, letting the final notes echo in her mind, she smiled. She had given everything she had. The audience had received it, and for a moment, everything felt right in the world. Music had done what it always does. It had reminded people of their humanity, their emotions, their dreams, and she had been the vessel. The night would eventually end. The audience would leave, and the hall would quiet down once more. But the memory of what had been shared would linger for a long time. It would live in the hearts of those who had listened, in the echoes of the music, in the energy of a performance that could not be repeated but would never be forgotten. Khatia closed her eyes one last time. Taking a deep breath, she felt gratitude for the music, for the audience, for the life that had allowed her to reach this moment. She had played with her heart, with honesty, with courage, and in return, she had felt the power of connection, the joy of shared emotion, the beauty of music alive and breathing. That night became a memory not just for her, but for everyone who had listened. It was a reminder that music is more than sound. It is life, it is feeling, it is human experience, shared in its purest form. And in that, Khatia Buniatishvili had given something unforgettable. As the last notes lingered in the air, Khatia allowed herself a moment of stillness. The hall was silent, the audience holding its breath, caught in the aftermath of what they had just experienced. She took a deep breath herself, feeling the energy slowly return to her body. The performance was not yet over, but this part had been a triumph. A moment of pure connection and emotion. She looked at the orchestra, and they exchanged quiet smiles, acknowledging the shared experience. They had created something extraordinary together, something that would be remembered long after the final note had faded. Khatia felt a sense of satisfaction, of fulfillment, of joy. This was why she performed, why she devoted herself to music, why she poured her heart into every note. The audience slowly began to release their collective breath, some whispering to each other, some simply sitting in awe. Khatia could sense their emotions, their gratitude, their amazement. She had reached them, connected with them, shared something deeply human. Music had done what it always did. It had created a bridge between people, a moment of shared understanding, a memory that would linger long after they left the hall. She prepared herself for the final section, knowing that the climax was still to come. The energy in the room was electric, the anticipation almost tangible. Khatia allowed herself to feel the excitement, to embrace the thrill of the moment. She knew that the audience was ready, that they were holding on to every sound, every movement, every gesture. The final notes would carry the weight of everything that had come before, and she was ready to give them everything she had. The hall was silent, but the silence was alive. Every listener held their breath, caught in the final moments of Rhapsody in Blue. Cash's fingers flew over the keys, moving with strength and elegance, yet each touch was filled with emotion. The music had reached its peak and she felt it coursing through her, through the orchestra, and into every person in the audience. It was a moment suspended in time, where everything else, the world outside, the worries, the distractions simply ceased to exist. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced with the intensity of the performance. She had lived for moments like this all her life. Every long hour of practice, every time she had pushed herself past exhaustion, every moment of doubt, it had all led to this instant. She could feel the power of the music, not just in the sound, but in the way it carried the weight of human emotion. It was joyous, playful, reflective, and bold all at once. The orchestra followed her lead perfectly, the musicians' eyes fixed on her with trust and understanding. They were not just playing notes. They were sharing the same journey. Each swell of sound, each pause, each flourish was a dialogue between Khatia and the orchestra. A conversation that the audience could feel even without seeing it. The unity of sound and emotion created a wave that swept over the hall, leaving everyone breathless. Khatia leaned into the keys, letting herself fully surrender to the music. She closed her eyes, feeling every vibration, every subtle nuance of sound. It was no longer a performance in the traditional sense, it was a living experience. The music had taken over, and she was simply the medium through which it spoke. Every note, every chord, every rapid run of her fingers was alive with meaning. She thought briefly about the audience. They had come with expectation, but she hoped they were feeling more than admiration. She hoped they were feeling connection, a sense that this music belonged to everyone simultaneously. That was the true magic of a live performance. In that moment, there were no strangers in the hall. Each person shared the same experience, breathing together with the music. Living inside the story that Khatia and the orchestra were telling, the tempo shifted, moving from the energetic bursts of earlier to a softer, reflective passage. Khatia allowed her hands to linger over the keys, letting the notes resonate in the air. There was a quiet intimacy in this section, a sense of tenderness and vulnerability. The audience leaned in, captivated. Some closed their eyes, letting the music carry them to places they remembered from their own lives. Others simply sat in stillness, unable to tear themselves away from the beauty unfolding before them. Khatia felt the depth of the music in her chest. It was not just the sound. It was the weight of every emotion the composition demanded. Joy, longing, hope, playfulness, melancholia were present, layered, and intertwined. She allowed herself to feel each one fully, letting it guide her fingers. The connection between emotion and touch was seamless, and the audience could feel it. They could hear the sincerity, the honesty, the life in every note. As the music rose again, the hall seemed to breathe with it. The energy returned, more intense than before. Kasha's body moved naturally with the rhythm, her hands flying over the keys. The audience responded instinctively, some leaning forward, some holding their breath, some letting a quiet gasp escape. Every reaction, though silent, fed back into the performance. It was a conversation, invisible yet undeniable. Between the performer and those listening, the middle section had demanded technical skill, but now the focus shifted to emotion and storytelling. Khatia allowed herself to take risks, to let the music guide her beyond what was written on the page. She added subtle flourishes, small improvisations, small touches of her own personality. The audience may not have recognized the technical details, but they could feel the honesty. They could sense that this was not just a recital, it was a living, breathing story being told in real time. She thought briefly about her life, about the path that had brought her here. She remembered early mornings, cold rooms, long hours, and lonely practice sessions. She remembered the moments of frustration and despair, the times when progress felt impossible. And she remembered the moments of triumph, the small victories that kept her going. All of those experiences were present in her hands now, shaping the music, giving it weight, giving it meaning. The music surged once more, faster and more energetic than ever. Khatia's fingers moved with precision, yet they were guided by feeling, not calculation. The hall seemed to pulse with every note. The orchestra matched her perfectly, their collective energy creating a wave that washed over the audience. People felt it physically, a thrill running through their bodies, a sense of being part of something larger than themselves. The final passages approached, and Khatia allowed herself to fully embrace the emotion. She let her body sway naturally with the rhythm, her expression reflecting the intensity of the music. The audience could see the story in her movements, could sense the depth of feeling behind every note. Some closed their eyes completely, surrendering themselves to the experience. Others watched with wide eyes, unable to look away. Caught in the spell of what was unfolding, her mind was fully present, yet completely calm. She felt every vibration, every echo, every subtle shift in the sound. She knew that the final moments would require both strength and delicacy. She allowed herself to feel the excitement, the tension, the beauty of the music. Each note became a word, each chord a sentence, each pause a breath shared between herself and the audience as the music neared its climax. Khatia leaned into the keys with a quiet determination. Her fingers moved faster, yet with grace. The hall seemed to vibrate with the intensity, the energy flowing from the piano to the orchestra, to the audience and back again. She could feel the hearts of the listeners, their emotions blending with hers, creating a shared experience that was both intimate and universal. The final chords approached, powerful and full of life. Khatia struck them with intention, letting the sound fill every corner of the hall. The orchestra followed, creating a wave of sound that seemed to suspend time itself. The audience held its collective breath, caught in the moment, unable to move, unable to speak, simply existing within the music. When the last note faded, there was a moment of absolute stillness. Silence hung in the air, not awkward, but reverent. The audience was suspended in awe, feeling the weight of what they had just experienced. Khatia lifted her hands slowly, allowing the final vibrations to settle. She opened her eyes and looked at the listeners, seeing the wide expressions, the tears, the smiles. She felt a quiet sense of triumph, not for herself, but for the shared moment they had all created. Then the applause began. Soft at first, then growing louder, rolling through the hall like a wave. The audience rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, shouting their appreciation. Khatia allowed herself a small smile, feeling the energy, the gratitude, the connection. This was what she had lived for, moments where music could move people, touch them deeply, remind them of life's beauty and fragility. Khatia smiled faintly as she played, feeling the connection, the energy, the life in the music. This was why she had dedicated herself to piano, why she had sacrificed so much, why she had endured years of practice and struggle. This moment, this shared experience of emotion and music, made everything worthwhile. The final notes of the middle section approached, powerful yet tender. She pressed each key with intention, letting the sound fill every corner of the hall. The orchestra mirrored her perfectly, creating a wave of emotion that swept over the audience. When the last note lingered and faded into silence, there was a moment of stillness, a pause in time where everyone simply felt, breathed, and existed together in that shared moment. Khatia took a deep breath, lifted her hands and looked at the audience. Their eyes were wide, their faces showing amazement, joy, and sometimes tears. She felt a quiet satisfaction. She had given herself fully to the music, and it had returned to her through the hearts of the listeners. This was the magic of live performance, the invisible thread connecting human beings through sound, emotion, and presence. The next part of the piece would come. But for now, the hall held a gentle reverence, a silent acknowledgement of what had just been shared. Khatia allowed herself a small smile, knowing that she had reached the hearts of those listening. The music was alive, and for this moment, everything else faded away. The hall was alive with the music, every corner vibrating with sound and emotion. Khatia's fingers moved across the piano keys with a kind of fluid certainty that made it impossible to look away. Each note carried weight and meaning, and the audience could feel it deep inside themselves. Her hands were quick, yet graceful, moving from one section of the keyboard to another with ease. She was no longer just performing. She was telling a story, one that had no words but spoke directly to the hearts of those listening. The middle of Rhapsody in Blue had given her a chance to explore the energy and playfulness of the music. But now she was entering a deeper, more emotional part. Her touch became softer, more deliberate. She leaned into the keys, letting her body follow the natural rise and fall of the melody. The notes seemed to breathe, as if they had life of their own. The audience noticed the change immediately. The energy in the room shifted from excitement to quiet wonder. People leaned forward, their attention held captive. Khatia's eyes were closed as she played. But she could feel the presence of every person in the hall. She could sense their anticipation, their curiosity, their connection. Music had always been a bridge for her, a way to reach people beyond language, beyond logic. Tonight, she was crossing that bridge with them. Each chord was a hand extended, each phrase a shared secret. She could feel their emotions intertwining with her own as she moved through the piece. The jazz influences in Gershwin's composition became more pronounced. Her fingers danced across the keys, playful and light, then suddenly dramatic and intense. The audience could feel the contrast, the joy, the melancholy, the sudden bursts of energy. Khatia knew that the beauty of this music lay in its unpredictability, in the way it could surprise and delight at the same time. She embraced that unpredictability, letting the music guide her without forcing it. The orchestra followed her every movement, responding instinctively to her cues. She did not need to signal them with words. A simple tilt of her head, a subtle shift in her posture, was enough. Years of performing with different musicians had taught her how to communicate through the smallest gestures. The connection between her and the orchestra was invisible but undeniable. The audience could feel the harmony it created at one point. She allowed a sudden burst of energy to sweep through the hall. The notes flew rapidly, almost as if she were challenging herself to keep pace with the music's intensity. Her body swayed naturally with the rhythm, and her expression reflected the thrill of the moment. The audience responded instinctively. Some gasped softly, some laughed quietly at the music's playfulness, and others simply held their breath, unable to believe the energy being released before them. In these moments, Khatia felt a surge of emotion unlike any other. Performing live was always a risk. Each time she played, she laid her heart bare. The music demanded honesty, and the audience demanded it too. She had learned long ago that perfection was not the goal. What mattered was truth, the ability to convey emotion, to make the listener feel something real. She felt that truth tonight, flowing freely through her fingers and into the hall. The softer sections of the piece returned, providing a contrast to the energetic bursts. Khatia's touch became gentle, almost tender. She allowed the notes to linger, to resonate fully in the air. The audience responded in kind, leaning in as if they could catch every subtle vibration. Some closed their eyes, letting the music paint images in their minds. Others sat completely still, lost in the moment. Letting the sound wash over them, Khatia remembered her early years as she played these passages. She had spent countless hours practicing in small rooms alone, learning to control every nuance of her touch, every subtle shift in tempo. She remembered the nights when the music had been her only companion, when she had cried silently over mistakes and rejoiced quietly at progress. All of those experiences were present now, guiding her hands. Shaping the way she played, the music began to build again, rising in intensity and complexity. The orchestra matched her energy, creating a wave of sound that filled the hall completely. Khatia's fingers moved with precision and passion, her body swaying slightly as she followed the natural flow of the composition. Every note had meaning, Every chord was deliberate. The audience could feel the story unfolding, though it was a story without words. It was a story of human experience, of emotion, of life itself. Some audience members had tears in their eyes. Others smiled quietly, caught in the beauty of the moment. Khatia could sense their reactions even without looking. Performing live was always a dialogue, and the response from the audience fueled her energy. She felt their emotions blending with her own, creating a shared experience that was both personal and universal. As the piece reached its climax, Khatia allowed herself to fully surrender to the music. Her hands moved faster, more decisively, her body leaning into the sound. The hall seemed to pulse with the energy she was releasing. The audience was caught in the wave, experiencing the music with her, feeling every nuance, every rise and fall. She was no longer just a performer. She was a storyteller, a conduit, a living part of the composition. The orchestra followed her lead perfectly, each musician responding instinctively to her cues. There was a sense of unity on stage, a shared purpose that made the music even more powerful. Khatia felt a thrill of joy as she played, knowing that they were creating something extraordinary together. The audience could sense it too, and their energy fed back into the performance, creating a cycle of connection and emotion at one point. The music softened suddenly, providing a brief moment of reflection. Khatia's touch became delicate, almost fragile. She allowed the notes to breathe, to resonate fully in the silence. The audience leaned in, feeling the intimacy of the moment. It was as if she were sharing a secret, a glimpse into her heart, and the listeners were honored to receive it. She thought about the people who had inspired her, who had supported her throughout her journey. Her family, her teachers, her friends, all of them, had contributed to the person she had become. As she played, she felt their presence with her, guiding her hands, supporting her courage, encouraging her to give everything to the music. She felt gratitude, and that gratitude became part of the sound. Infusing the performance with warmth and sincerity, the music began to rise again, building toward the final sections. Khatia's fingers moved with renewed energy, her body swaying naturally with the rhythm. The hall vibrated with sound, the orchestra responding perfectly to her lead. The audience could feel the excitement, the anticipation, the raw emotion that was pouring from the stage. It was a shared experience, a moment of connection that transcended language and time. She allowed herself a brief smile as she played. This was why she had chosen this life, why she had devoted herself to music. These moments, when the audience and performer became one, when emotion and skill combined to create something unforgettable, were worth every sacrifice, every long hour of practice, every moment of doubt. Music was not just her talent, it was her voice, her way of speaking to the world. As the final passages approached, Khatia's energy intensified. Her hands moved faster, more decisively, each note a declaration of emotion. The hall seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the performance. The audience was caught in the wave, experiencing the music as fully as she was. Some closed their eyes completely, letting themselves be carried by the sound. Others watched in awe, unable to look away. The music swelled to its final moments, powerful and full of life. Khatia's hands moved with precision and passion, her body leaning into the sound. The orchestra followed her perfectly, creating a wave of emotion that filled the hall. Every note, every chord, every subtle shift in tempo was deliberate, a part of the story she was telling. The audience could feel it, experiencing the music not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Then her fingers pressed the first keys. The clarinet solo that begins Rhapsody in Blue floated through the hall. It was soft, almost hesitant at first, yet full of promise. Even in those early notes, the audience could sense that this performance would be different. Khatia's hands seemed to flow like water over the keys, each sound deliberate but natural, as if she were speaking with her soul rather than performing music. She had practiced thousands of times. The orchestra followed her lead, and a subtle energy spread across the stage. The opening section of the piece painted pictures in the minds of everyone listening. They could imagine a city waking up in the morning, streets filling with people rushing to their jobs, the sunlight reflecting off tall buildings, the movement of life captured in Gershwin's notes. But Katia's touch added something more, something human and deeply personal. Her eyes closed for a moment, and she let her body move with the music. She did not just play the notes. She became part of them. Every rising note, every gentle pause, every sudden burst of energy seemed to echo her inner story. People in the audience leaned forward instinctively, feeling themselves pulled into the story she was telling. Even the most distracted listeners were caught by the emotion in the performance. The first fast runs came, playful, energetic notes bouncing across the piano. Fingers moving in perfect coordination, Katia's body swayed slightly, following the rhythm. She had always believed that music is not only in the fingers, but also in the body, in the small movements that make the sound breathe. She had practiced these runs countless times. But tonight, they were more than practice. They were a conversation with the audience. Every note was a word, every chord a sentence, every pause a moment of reflection. The orchestra mirrored her energy, the brass and strings adding color and texture. She smiled faintly to herself, feeling the silent communication between her and the musicians. Years of experience had taught her how to guide the group without speaking a word. A simple glance or a slight movement of her hand could shape the flow of the music. On stage, it felt like being in a living organism, where every part mattered and moved together in harmony. She felt the first wave of emotion rising within her. Music always did this. Sometimes it stayed controlled, calm, and precise. But other times it demanded to be poured out, no matter the risk. Khatia welcomed it. She had learned long ago that true performance comes from surrendering to the music, letting it take over and guide you. If she held back, the audience would feel it. If she gave too much, the music would shine even brighter. As the middle sections of Rhapsody in Blue approached, the piece became more complex. The playful jazz notes mixed with sweeping classical movements, creating a challenge for any performer. Yet Khatia handled them with ease and grace. She did not rush. She listened to the sound she was creating, adjusting pressure and tempo instinctively. Each crescendo built naturally, each diminuendo felt like a sigh. She made sure every listener could feel the story behind every phrase. Some moments were soft and tender, almost whispering. Her fingers barely touched the keys, letting the notes float gently into the room. Listeners leaned closer, as if they could catch every subtle emotion. Mothers held the hands of children who were seeing live classical music for the first time. Older audience members closed their eyes and remembered their own youth, the places they had been, and the people they had loved. The music connected them all, and Khatia was the bridge. Then came a sudden shift. Fast. Sharp notes with bright, lively energy. She leaned forward slightly, her body moving with the rhythm, almost like she was dancing without leaving the bench. The hall seemed to vibrate with the sound. Some in the audience gasped softly, surprised by the intensity. The piano and orchestra combined like a storm building. She felt a thrill that was part fear, part excitement. Every performance was a chance to risk something. To let the music take control, Katia's eyes opened for a moment, glancing at the orchestra. Her gaze was calm, yet full of power. The musicians responded immediately, their own energy rising to meet hers. It was as if the music had become alive, an organism that required them all to participate fully. The audience could feel this energy even if they did not see the small gestures and cues between the performers. They only heard the sound and felt the emotion. The piece then softened again, and Khatia let her hands linger over the keys. She allowed a moment of reflection. The notes became slower, warmer, more lyrical. It was like walking through memories, recalling moments of happiness, longing, and hope. Her touch on the piano was gentle, yet purposeful. Every chord seemed to contain a story, and the audience felt it. Some closed their eyes completely, letting themselves be transported. Others sat motionless, holding their breath in awe. She remembered her own journey as a child during this part. She had spent years practicing in small rooms, alone, sometimes exhausted, sometimes frustrated. But in those moments, music was always there to comfort her, to give her meaning. Now, as she performed in front of hundreds of people, she felt those same emotions returning, magnified and shared. The memory of her past merged with the present, and the music became a bridge between them. Her hands moved across the keys with precision, but also with a natural flow that made every note feel alive. She could feel the audience's reactions even without looking. A small cough, a quiet sigh, or a movement in the rows ahead told her they were engaged. This feedback, even if unconscious, guided her energy. Performing live was like a dialogue she gave, and they responded. The conversation was unspoken, but deeply real. Suddenly, the piece demanded more speed, more complexity. The notes rushed like a river, cascading from her fingers. The orchestra matched the rhythm, and the hall seemed to pulse with life. Khatia smiled faintly, feeling the thrill of being completely immersed. Each challenge, each difficult passage was an opportunity to express something deeper. Her body and mind were fully present, every part contributing to the living music. She noticed a few young students in the audience, their eyes wide with amazement. She could feel their wonder and excitement. Music had the power to reach across generations, and she felt proud to be a part of that magic. Her focus did not waver, but her heart swelled with gratitude. She thought about all the people who had encouraged her, who had inspired her, who had believed in her when she doubted herself. This moment was also for them. The dynamic changes of Rhapsody in Blue continued, shifting from quiet introspection to lively, almost chaotic energy. Khatia moved seamlessly between the extremes. Her hands flew across the keys with controlled power, her body swaying naturally, her expression reflecting the music's story. It was not showy or artificial. It was real, heartfelt, human. Every listener could feel it. She paused briefly at a dramatic point, letting the silence hang in the air for a fraction of a second before continuing. The audience could feel the tension, the anticipation. Then the music resumed, stronger and more alive than before. Khatia felt a rush of emotion. This was the moment she loved, the moment when music became more than sound. It became feeling, memory, life itself. The orchestra and piano moved together as one, a wave of sound carrying the audience along. Khatia's fingers seemed to dance, telling stories without words. Every note, every chord, every subtle change in tempo had meaning. Some audience members had tears in their eyes. Some sat in stunned silence, unable to process the beauty unfolding before them. Others smiled quietly, lost in the music. She reached the final sections of the middle part, where the piece demanded both speed and emotional depth. It was not easy, but she had prepared for this. She felt the adrenaline, the joy, the pressure, and the responsibility all at once. It was a test of skill, endurance, and heart. She met it fully. She could hear every note, feel every vibration, sense every emotion that the music demanded. And then came a softer, reflective passage. Khatia slowed slightly, letting each note resonate fully. The audience leaned in, feeling the contrast after the fast sections. The music became intimate, like a conversation shared only between the piano and each listener. It was a reminder that music was not only power and excitement, but also tenderness and connection. Her hands moved effortlessly, guided by instinct and emotion. She let herself feel everything: the joy, the longing, the excitement, the memory, the hope. Every person in the hall felt it too. Music, she knew, was not just about hearing. It was about feeling. She could see it in the posture, the expressions, the breaths of the audience. They were alive in her music, fully present in the moment. As the passage ended, the energy built once more, leading toward the climax. Khatia leaned forward slightly, her hands moving with precision and passion. The hall vibrated with sound. The orchestra followed her completely, their own energy rising with hers. The music became a wave, carrying everyone along, unstoppable and alive. Every note she played told a story. Every chord she struck was a word in a larger sentence. She did not just perform. She spoke through music, revealing something true about life, emotion, and human experience. The audience could feel it. Some closed their eyes completely, some whispered prayers of thanks, some simply sat in awe. They all knew they were witnessing something special. Her childhood was filled with practice sessions that lasted for hours. She would sit at the piano, her fingers moving over the keys as she tried to capture the sound she heard in her imagination. Sometimes it was joyful, sometimes frustrating. There were days when the notes refused to flow, and she would slam her hands down in frustration. But she always returned to the piano the next day, because music was more than talent. It was her passion, her need, her identity. Her family had not been wealthy, but they had been supportive. They had made sacrifices to ensure she could have lessons, instruments, and access to teachers who could guide her. Every small victory, learning a difficult piece, performing at a local concert, receiving praise from a teacher had felt monumental. And every setback, failed auditions, criticism from others, moments of self-doubt had tested her determination. It was in those challenges that she learned resilience, patience, and the deep discipline that would one day allow her to perform on grand stages. Khatia remembered the first time she had heard Rhapsody in Blue as a young girl. The piece had been playing on an old record player, and she had been immediately captivated. There was something alive in it, something that combined joy and sorrow, playfulness and sophistication, all in one. She had sat cross-legged on the floor, listening over and over, trying to replicate the sounds on her small piano. Even then, she felt a connection to the music that went beyond technical skill. It was emotional, instinctive, almost magical. As she grew older, her talent became more evident and opportunities began to appear. Competitions, concerts, and masterclasses offered chances to showcase her skills. Yet every opportunity brought pressure. People expected perfection, and criticism was never far away. Some said she was too emotional, too bold, too unconventional. But Khatia had learned to embrace her style, to trust that her connection to the music mattered more than conforming to someone else's idea of perfection. The journey was not only about skill, but also about understanding the essence of music. She had spent hours studying composers, listening to recordings, and analyzing interpretations. But beyond technique and knowledge, she focused on feeling. She wanted to convey truth, to make people feel what she felt when she played. It was not enough to play the notes correctly. She had to live them, breathe them, become one with the music. Her teachers had guided her, sometimes with strictness, sometimes with encouragement. They had taught her the importance of discipline, the value of patience, and the necessity of perseverance. But they also encouraged her to find her own voice, to let the music speak through her. That was the most important lesson she had learned. Talent alone could only take someone so far. The heart behind it made the difference between a good musician and a great one. Khatia thought about the moments of doubt, the nights when she questioned whether she was good enough. There were times when she had performed poorly, when her hands had trembled under pressure, when she had walked off stage feeling defeated. Yet each of those moments had taught her something vital. They taught her humility, resilience, and the understanding that mistakes were not failures, they were opportunities to grow. Every challenge shaped her, adding depth to her performances and authenticity to her expression as she prepared for the concert that night. She also reflected on the countless hours she had spent alone at the piano. She had learned to listen not just with her ears, but with her heart. She had learned to feel every chord, every phrase, every pause. Music had become a way to explore emotion, to connect with herself, and eventually with others. She knew that when she played live, she would not only be performing for an audience, but also sharing pieces of her life, her thoughts, her feelings. Her experiences the night of the performance was particularly important because of the piece she had chosen. Rhapsody in Blue was not easy. It demanded technical skill, emotional depth, and a sense of storytelling. The music was alive, and the performer had to be alive too. Khatia had studied the piece for years, but it was only in the moments of live performance that it truly came to life. The challenge was not only to play the notes, but to convey the feeling behind them, to make the audience understand, to let them experience the music as a living thing. Backstage, she could hear the soft murmurs of the audience settling into their seats. There was anticipation, excitement, curiosity. Some faces she could imagine, some she could not. But she knew they all had come for the same reason, to feel, to experience, to be moved. That was the gift of live music. It was a shared moment, a connection between the performer and those who listened. She felt a sense of responsibility, not as a burden, but as a privilege. She had the chance to create something meaningful for everyone present. Her hands hovered over the keys as she thought about the first time. She had performed in front of a large audience. She had been nervous, her fingers trembling, her heart racing. But as soon as the first note sounded, something had shifted. The nerves had become energy. The fear had become focus. And she had realized that performing was not about her alone. It was about the music. It's about the audience, about the shared experience. That realization had changed the way she approached every performance since. Khatia took a deep breath, feeling the familiar mix of excitement and calm. She reminded herself that the audience wanted her to succeed, that they were there to experience the music, not to judge her. She thought about all the people who had believed in her, who had guided her, who had encouraged her to keep going when the path had seemed impossible. Their support was with her now, an invisible presence giving strength and confidence. She also reflected on the importance of emotion in performance. It was not enough to be precise, to hit every note perfectly. Music demanded authenticity. The audience could tell if a performer was simply executing instructions or if they were truly feeling the piece. She had learned to trust her instincts, to let her heart guide her fingers, to allow herself to be vulnerable on stage. Vulnerability was not weakness. It was honesty, and honesty was what made music unforgettable. As she finally prepared to step onto the stage, she felt a mix of anticipation, excitement, and reverence. The moment was both familiar and new, a challenge she had faced many times, yet one that could never be repeated exactly. She walked toward the piano, her movements deliberate, her mind focused. She thought about the first notes, the way the sound would travel through the hall, the way it would reach every listener. She knew that from the very beginning she had to give herself completely to the music, to let it flow through her without hesitation or restraint. Her dress brushed softly against the floor as she approached the piano. She looked at the instrument with quiet respect. It was not just a tool, it was a companion, a partner in the journey she had undertaken since childhood. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the familiar texture, the subtle resistance, the potential for sound waiting to be released. This moment, she knew, was the culmination of years of dedication, sacrifice, and passion. The lights dimmed slightly, and the audience fell into silence. Khatia felt the energy of the room, the anticipation of hundreds of people waiting for the first note. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath, centering herself. She reminded herself that this was not just a performance for skill, but a performance for connection. Every note, every phrase, every pause was an opportunity to reach the hearts of those listening. The first notes would soon fill the hall. She could feel the weight of expectation. But it was not a burden, it was a gift. It was the gift of sharing something deeply personal, something alive, something real. As she pressed the first key, she let the music carry her, trusting in the preparation, the years of practice, and the guidance of her own instincts. In that moment, the past and the present merged. She felt her childhood self sitting at a small piano, her teenage self practicing late into the night, her adult self performing for a packed audience, all part of the same journey. Every struggle, every triumph, every moment of doubt had led her here. And now, with the first sound, the journey became a shared experience, one that included everyone in the hall, everyone who had come to listen, everyone who would feel the music long after it ended. Khatia's performance that night was more than notes on a page. It was a reflection of her life, her passion, her dedication. It was a gift to the audience, a moment of connection that transcended language and time. It was proof that music was not just sound. It was emotion, memory, experience, and life itself. And as she prepared to begin, she knew that this performance could be unforgettable. Not because of technical skill alone, but because of the heart she would put into every note. The lights dimmed completely, leaving only a soft glow on the piano and the first few rows of the audience. The hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first note. Kasha's fingers hovered above the keys, almost trembling with quiet energy, though no one could see it. She felt the entire space around her, the air, the walls, the faint scent of polished wood. The murmur of the orchestra quietly tuning, all waiting for the sound to come alive. She took one deep breath and let it out slowly. The concert hall was almost silent before the show began, and the air felt thick with excitement. People sat in their seats holding tickets they had bought weeks earlier. Many had traveled long distances just to hear one live performance they knew could not be repeated. They were waiting for a special moment, something that might stay with them for the rest of their lives. At the center of all that expectation was one person, a pianist known for passion, power, and deep emotion. Her name was Khatia Buniatishvili. Behind the stage curtains, she sat alone with her thoughts. She had faced rooms like this many times in her life, but every concert felt new, and every audience felt different. Even though she had already played in huge halls around the world, the small voice inside her still whispered questions. Was she ready? Would the music speak the way she hoped? Would people feel her emotions? Or would they simply hear notes? For a moment, she let her fingers rest on the piano keys backstage, trying to warm them. They were cold, as they always were before she performed. She took a deep breath and reminded herself how much she loved the piano, how much it had shaped her life, how it had given her a voice when she did not know how to speak to the world. The concert was set to feature Rhapsody in Blue, a piece she had known since childhood. The music was famous, full of energy and longing, a mix of jazz and classical sound that made people feel alive. Many had heard it before on recordings, but tonight they wanted something different. They wanted life breathed into the music. They wanted to see someone connect to it, not just perform it. While she sat backstage, she remembered her early years. She did not grow up in luxury or comfort. She grew up in a world where the piano was not just a beautiful instrument. It was an escape, a hope, and sometimes the only thing that made sense. As a young girl, she practiced for hours every day, dreaming of a day like this. She remembered sitting at a small piano using a wooden chair instead of a bench, her feet barely touching the floor. She played until her back hurt, until her fingers felt weak, until her mind could not hold another note. Yet she felt alive in that struggle. It was strange to look at life now and see how far she had come. Back then, she never imagined standing before huge audiences, wearing a long black performance dress, waiting behind grand curtains to step into bright lights. She only wanted to speak through sound. She did not care about fame or cameras. She cared about feelings, about the way music could reach people without words, the way it could hold sadness and joy at the same time. Behind the stage, she could hear the audience talking softly. Some voices carried excitement. Others whispered curiosity. People wondered what this performance would feel like, how she would play it, and how deeply she would reach inside the piece. They had seen recordings of her playing before. They knew she moved with the music like the notes were part of her body. They knew she played not only with skill, but with heart. This night was not another concert. It was a moment people were eager to witness. She stood up slowly and walked around the quiet hallway behind the stage. The building smelled like wood and old velvet. A worker walked by and smiled kindly. She smiled back, grateful for the silent support. She was never rude or distant before a show. She had learned that kindness helped calm the nerves. She had also learned that fear never fully disappeared. Even the greatest artists felt it. It was not a sign of weakness, but a sign that one cared deeply. She closed her eyes and imagined the piano waiting on stage. She could almost hear the first notes of Rhapsody in Blue in her mind, the famous clarinet gliding upward in that unforgettable opening line. That sound always painted images in her head: busy streets, bright city lights, people chasing dreams. Gershwin's music told stories, and she wanted to honor them. As she breathed in, she thought about the people outside. Many of them did not know her story. They only knew the music she played, and perhaps that was enough. Some audience members were students hoping to feel inspiration. Some were older listeners who had followed classical music their whole lives. Others simply loved art and needed to feel something strong again. That is what music often did. It reminded people they were alive. Long before the show, she had woken early in the morning. She never slept well before performances. Her thoughts moved like fast notes across a page. She stretched her hands and arms to prepare her body. She made tea and sipped it quietly while staring at the rising sun. She studied the sheet music again even though she knew every line. It wasn't about remembering notes. It was about remembering meaning. Her friends sometimes asked her why she still got nervous. They thought that once someone reached international success, everything became easy. But she always explained that performing was not about numbers or awards. It was about honesty. When she played, she was opening her heart to strangers every time. That takes courage. And with courage always comes fear. Inside her dressing room, it was a mirror, tall and clean, reflecting the long dress she had chosen. She ran her hand across the fabric and thought about how different she felt from her public image. People often described her as bold, confident, and wild at the piano. But the truth was more quiet and simple. She was still the same girl who started with nothing but a dream and a belief that music had a soul. Outside the room, a soft knock came. It was time to begin. She nodded to herself, picked up her calm breathing, and followed a narrow hallway toward the stage entrance. The hallway felt endless, each step carrying her closer to hundreds of eyes. As she walked, she remembered evenings when she had no audience at all. Only the piano and dim light, when she poured out her feelings to empty rooms. Even those nights mattered. They built the foundation of moments like this one. The stage door opened, and she stood just behind it. She could now hear the murmuring of the crowd more clearly. They were waiting for her signal. The orchestra musicians were already on stage warming their fingers and checking their instruments. Some of them looked toward the side of the stage as if trying to feel her presence. They respected her. They admired her. And they knew that when she stepped out, something powerful would happen. She touched her fingers together, warming them once more. She closed her eyes and thought about why she loved this piece so much. She remembered being a teenager hearing it for the first time on an old radio. The music surprised her. It sounded free, almost like the piano was laughing, crying, dancing, and running all at once. It carried colors. It carried cities. It carried human dreams. She knew immediately she wanted to play it one day on a huge stage. Tonight was that day. Standing backstage, she also thought about her family. They had supported her from the beginning with love and patience. They gave her strength without asking for anything back. She replayed memories of her mother sitting beside her during practice, encouraging her to continue even when her hands shook. She remembered her childhood home, with its warm kitchen smells and loud echoes of piano keys bouncing from room to room. All these memories were part of her music. As the final minutes passed before she stepped onto the stage, she reflected on how strange life was. Sometimes success looked shiny and perfect from the outside, but behind it were long years of effort, tears, and sacrifice. She had missed family events, birthdays, holidays, quiet evenings, just to pursue her art. Many people praised the results, but few saw the hidden cost. She was not complaining. She accepted her path. But she always recognized the truth behind the applause. A stage manager whispered that it was almost time. She listened to the audience settling into stillness, waiting for the lights to dim. She leaned against the wall and smiled, letting a calm feeling wash over her. She had done all the work. She had learned every note. She had spent a lifetime preparing. Now she only needed to feel, not think. She whispered quietly to herself, reminding her heart that this night was not about perfection. It was about connection. If she played one wrong note, that was fine, as long as her emotions stayed honest. People did not come to see a machine. They came to see a human being. They came to watch someone breathe life into a piano. The orchestra quieted, and the audience lights dimmed. Silence filled every corner of the room. In that stillness, she stepped forward. Her footsteps were soft, but full of purpose. Behind the curtain, she paused for a second and listened to her heartbeat. It was strong, steady, and ready. The curtain began to rise, and she stepped into the light. The audience looked up at her. She could see every pair of eyes, hopeful, curious, excited, nervous. She bowed gently and sat before the piano. The bench felt familiar beneath her, like returning home. She placed her fingers softly on the keys. For a breath, the world seemed to wait. And then, with one final deep breath, she prepared to begin a performance that she knew could mark a moment in history, not because of fame, but because of truth. Before stepping onto the stage, Khatia thought about how she had arrived at this moment. It had not been an easy journey, but every struggle had shaped her into the musician she was. She had grown up in a small town where music was not always valued, where every opportunity to learn and practice had to be fought for. Yet from an early age, she had known that the piano was not just an instrument, it was her voice, her way to communicate with the world when words felt inadequate.